Hello everyone, welcome to evolutionary biology class, and we are in unit 2, which is molecular evolution. So the topic for today is molecular clock. So what is molecular clock? So it is a hypothesis that predicts a constant rate of molecular evolution among species. So it is also a method of genetic analysis that can be used to estimate evolutionary rates and timescales using data from DNA or proteins. So starting with the introduction, the rate and mode of evolution are a central theme of biological research. So the main theme of biological research is to know the rate and mode of evolution of various species. So this places importance on the estimation of evolutionary timescales, which provide the backdrop for our interpretation of evolutionary patterns and processes. So traditionally, such inferences were made from the fossil records coupled with the radiometric dating, that is carbon 14 dating. So fossils can provide an estimate of when different lineages first appeared and when species diverged from each other. But in many cases, however, such data are unavailable, forcing us to look somewhere else for a source of this kind of temporal information. So the molecular clock proposed during the 1960s by Jacarandel and Pauling allows evolutionary timescales to be estimated using genetic data. So the molecular clocks have provided insight into significant evolutionary events such as human evolutions and the radiations of bird, mammals and flowering plants. So molecular clock methods continue to undergo improvement, which is crucial if we are to take advantage of the growing wealth of the genomic data. So the molecular clock hypothesis, it hypothesizes that the rate of molecular evolution as reflected in changes in DNA or protein synthesis through time are constant among the various lineages. But it also says that it is not constant across different regions of the genome. So the nucleotide mutations cause DNA sequences to change over time, whereas the mutations of the amino acid lead to evolution in proteins. These mutations occur with a constant probability rather than at a constant frequency. That means that molecular clock is stochastic, which is occurring randomly rather than metronomic, which means that at a rhythm. So the occurrence of mutation in a DNA sequence is often modeled using a Poisson process. So a corollary of the molecular clock hypothesis is that the genetic difference between any two species is proportional to the time since they last shared a common ancestor. So this is a useful relationship because it allows evolutionary timescales to be estimated from genetic data, provided that the rate of molecular evolution is known. So the molecular clock represents the only method for studying the evolutionary timescales of various organisms that have failed to leave any trace in the fossil record. So where there are no fossil record, the only method to know how the organism has evolved is via the molecular clock. So it includes many group of invertebrates, bacteria and different viruses. So it also allows us to estimate the timing of events that are too recent to be resolved by fossil evidence, such as divergence among conspecific populations. Next, let's deal with the history of the molecular clock. So as mentioned above, so this hypothesis was put forward by Emily Jacarandel and Linus Pauling in the year 1962, who assumed a constant evolutionary rate in their analysis of globin proteins from the vertebrates. So they observed about 18 differences in amino acids between horse and human and estimated the mutation rate by assuming that the divergence between these two species occurred around 100 to 160 million years ago. So upon extrapolating this rate, Jacarandel and Pauling in the year 1962 estimated that humans diverged from gorillas about 11 million years ago. So they also estimated that different copies of globin genes first diverged from each other in the late Precambrian period. So when reporting these estimates, the Jacarandel and Pauling warned about the possible confounding effects of number of factors, including natural selection, variation in population size and the mutational saturation also. So in the following years, further studies produced evidence of clock-like evolution in the other proteins also. So Dolittle and Blombach in 1964 found a simple relationship between sequence identity and time since divergence in mammalian fibrinopeptides. So here is the figure 1, which shows the plot of amino acid identity of fibrinopeptides from various pairs of mammals plotted against the time divergence. So the divergence times are based on the estimates of the fossil records. So these data are from the article published by Doolittle and Bloomberg in the year 1964. And a year later, in 1965, Zuckerndl and Pauling coined the term molecular evolutionary clock finally. So it promised to be a useful tool in biological research, as demonstrated shortly afterward by Saris and Wilson in 1967 in their pioneering studies of evolutionary timescales of hominids and other primates. Next, the genetic equidistance phenomenon was first noted in 1963 by Emmanuel Margoliouth, who wrote, "It appears that the number of residue differences between cytochrome C of any two species is mostly conditioned by the time elapsed since the line of evolution leading to these two species originally diverged." So together with the work of Emily Zuckerndl and Linus Pauling, the genetic equidistance result directly led to the formal postulation of the molecular clock hypothesis in the early 1960s. So now let us see the molecular clock and its use in the phylogenetic analysis. So molecular clocks are typically used in phylogenetic analysis, which aim to reconstruct evolutionary trees that show relationship among species of interest, and we will be seeing this in the next figure 2. So internal nodes in the tree represent evolutionary divergence events, and the timing of these events can be estimated using molecular clocks. So a number of statistical methods are available for testing the molecular clock hypothesis for a given set of DNA or protein sequences. So when a molecular clock is rejected for a data set, one can use a statistical model to account for a rate variation when estimating evolutionary timescales. So when estimating the evolutionary timescales in a phylogenetic analysis, the molecular clock also needs to be calibrated. And this can be done by assigning an absolute age to one or more nodes in a phylogeny, which can then act as a reference point for estimating the ages of remaining nodes. And calibrations are often based on fossil record, which can provide date estimates for the divergence events in the phylogeny. Let's see figure 2. So this figure shows the phylogenetic tree, which shows the relationship of species from three genera, that is A, B and C. So genera A and B are found on the mainland, whereas species of genus C are found in the offshore island that was formed by volcanic activity. The tree is drawn to an unspecified time scale so that the branch lengths are proportional to time. So the tree illustrates the use of two molecular clock calibrations. First, a fossil taxon has been assigned to lineage leading to genus A, and this places a minimum age constant on the divergence of A from B and C. Second, a geological calibration is placed on divergence between B and C. The split between these genera is assumed to coincide with the formation of the offshore island on which genus C is formed. The age of the island is estimated using radiometric dating, and the uncertainty in this date estimate is incorporated into the calibration as indicated by the black bar. So gray error bar represents the uncertainty in the molecular clock estimates of lineage divergence times. So if a fossil taxon can be reliably assigned to one of the lineages in the tree, then the divergence of that lineage from its sister lineage must be older than the age of the fossil. So calibrations can also be based on geological events, including the separation of continents and emergence of islands, if they are linked to evolutionary divergences. So an example of this might involve two sister genera, one of which is endemic to mainland and the other is endemic to an offshore island, and that formed as a result of the volcanic activity. So the timing of the divergence between the two genera can be estimated by the age of island, which in turn can be estimated using radiometric dating. In some cases, previous genetic estimates of dates are employed as calibrations. So these are known as secondary calibrations and are generally used when other calibrating information is unavailable. Once the phylogenetic tree is calibrated by fixing or constraining the ages of one or more nodes in the phylogeny, the ages of the remaining nodes can be estimated using a molecular clock analysis of the genetic data. So this process is also referred to as molecular dating or divergence time estimation. So there is a large range of methods and models that have been developed for the purpose, implemented in various statistical frameworks. So these methods are available in the range of computer programs, including most standard phylogenetic software. So let's discuss the method of calibration in the molecular clock in detail. So the molecular clock alone can only say that the time period is twice as long as another, but it cannot assign concrete or exact dates. So for viral phylogenetics and ancient DNA studies, so for these two areas of evolutionary biology where it is possible to sample sequences over evolutionary time scale, the dates of the intermediate sample can be used to more precisely calibrate the molecular clock. However, most phylogenies require that the molecular clock be calibrated against independent evidence about dates such as the fossil record. So there are two general methods for calibrating the molecular clock using fossil data. So one is known as the node calibration and the other is known as the tip calibration. So what is node calibration? Sometimes it is also referred as the node dating. So node calibration is a method for phylogeny calibration that is done by placing fossil constants at nodes. A node calibration fossil is the oldest discovered representative of that clade, so which is used to constant its minimum age, and due to the fragmentary nature of fossil record, the true most recent common ancestor of clade will likely never be found. So in order to account for this, in node calibration analysis, a maximum clade age must be estimated. Next is tip calibration. Sometimes it is also referred to as tip dating. So tip calibration is a method of molecular clock calibration in which fossils are treated as taxa and placed on the tips of the tree. So this is achieved by creating a matrix that includes a molecular dataset for the extant taxa along with the morphological dataset for both the extinct and the extant taxa. Unlike node calibration, this method reconstructs the tree topology and places the fossils simultaneously. Molecular and morphological models work together simultaneously, allowing morphology to inform the placement of fossils. So tip calibration makes use of all the relevant fossil taxa during clock calibration rather than relying only on the oldest fossils of each clade. So this method does not rely on the interpretation of negative evidence to infer maximum clade ages. Next is total evidence dating. So this approach to tip calibration goes a step further by simultaneously estimating fossil placement, topology and the evolutionary timescale together. So in this method, the age of the fossil can inform its phylogenetic position in addition to morphology. So by allowing all aspects of tree reconstruction to occur simultaneously, the risk of biased results is decreased. So this approach has been improved upon by pairing it with different models. So one current method of molecular clock calibration is total evidence dating paired with fossilized birth date model and a model of morphological evolution. So for an example, let's see the origin of HIV virus applying a molecular clock. So various researchers have used a molecular clock to date the origin of HIV infections in humans. So phylogenetic analysis shows that HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, is descendant from viruses that infect chimpanzees and other primates. So most of these viruses do not cause AIDS-like diseases in their native host. So when did HIV jump to humans? So for this, there is no simple answer because the virus has spread to humans more than once. So the multiple origins of HIV are reflected in the variety of strains or the genetic types of the virus. The virus's genetic material is made up of RNA, and like other RNA viruses, it evolves very quickly. So this is the figure that shows the dating of the origin of HIV-1M virus with the molecular clock. So the most widespread strain in humans is HIV-1M. To pinpoint the earliest HIV-1M infections, researchers compared samples of the virus from various times during the epidemic, including a sample from 1959. A comparison of gene sequences showed that the virus has evolved in a clock-like fashion. When extrapolating backward in time using the molecular clock, it indicates that the HIV-1M strain first spread to humans during the 1930s. And there are also a lot of controversies regarding this molecular clock. So the molecular clock has had a long history of controversy, beginning with the criticism of the assumption of rate constancy and continuing with debate over relative merits of the neutral theory compared with natural selection. And the current debates include the use of calibrations in genetic dating analysis and the constancy of evolutionary rates across timescales. So, relationship with neutral theory. The observation of clock-like rate of molecular change was originally purely phenomenological. Later, the work of Moto Kimura, who developed the neutral theory of molecular evolution, also predicted the molecular clock hypothesis. Next is the uses of this molecular clock. So, the molecular clock technique is an very important role in molecular systematics. The use of molecular genetics information to determine the correct scientific classification of organisms or to study variation in selective forces. So, knowledge of approximately constant rate of molecular evolution in particular sets of lineages also facilitates establishing the dates of phylogenetic events, including those not documented by fossils, such as the divergence of living taxa and the formation of the phylogenetic tree. So, in these cases, especially over long stretches of time, the limitation of molecular hypotheses must be considered because such estimates may be off by 50% or more. So, in summary, the molecular clock has undergone considerable evolution during its long history. Even then, it is very useful as a hypothesis in molecular evolution, and it is an important tool for estimating evolutionary rates and timescales. So, new molecular clock methods are being developed in order to take advantage of the large amounts of genomic data that are being generated daily. So, with further refinement and development, the molecular clock will continue to play an important role in understanding the evolution of life on Earth. So, with this, we come to the end of this class. Thank you for listening. And if you like the video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel, and also click on the bell icon for getting notified for the upcoming classes. Thank you.